Let's continue in this video with our look at science and belief in the transcendent or God, with the question, why do people think science shows that the transcendent or God does not exist, and why they are wrong about this? Now, this is not all people. This is less people than most people think, actually. But it does seem to be an idea that's out there, and we want to bring it to light. So number one is a misunderstanding of the nature of Scripture. Again, I remember when I was teaching a class once, and a student afterwards told me, hey, before I took your class, I thought that science had proved the Bible wrong. Right? I mean, I'll never forget that. And that was maybe 15 years ago. So this is important. People might misunderstand the nature of Scripture, and that may lead them to think that religion is nonsense and therefore there is no God, right? And a lot of steps there, but that seems to be something that's going on, right? And number two is, and we've already talked about this in previous videos, trying to use science to fulfill a psychological need for certainty. All right, so let's start off here with the nature of Scripture. Some Christian communities mistakenly believe that everything in the Bible is a scientific and historical fact. Right? We call that a fundamentalist or literalist interpretation. We call the people who make this mistaken assumption or hold this mistaken belief fundamentalists or literalists. Now, I realize some people listening to this video might be fundamentalists or literalists, and I just want you to keep an open mind to what I'm saying, okay? And try to understand what I'm saying, where I'm coming from, so that you can at least explain the arguments that we're making here. Okay? And you personally, I respect your freedom and your ability to practice your own beliefs and hold your own beliefs. Okay? So I just want to make that as a kind of disclaimer. But understand why we believe, when I say we, I mean the official teachings of the Catholic Church, although you will find Catholics who are fundamentalists. The church, the teaching authority of the church, the bishops actually have condemned a fundamentalist approach to Scripture. This, again, is condemned. This is wrong. This is not the right way to read Scripture. Okay? Why? Many parts of the Bible use symbolic language. It's not something that was not intended to be taken as word for word fact on science and history. Right? There are some facts in there. There are historical facts in the Bible, right? And the Bible gets quite historical around the time of King David in the Israelite narrative that we'll look at. Right? This is because people were writing things down as they were happening. The Israelites had developed the alphabet, and they had professional scribes whose job it was to write things down as they were going on. However, even that would not be taken as a modern history or science text, right? So we have to understand the symbolism used in the Bible, that not everything in the Bible is a scientific and historical fact. For example, some people don't realize that the creation story in Genesis 1, and we're just going to talk about that first creation story. We'll talk about the second one later in the course. But in Genesis 1, there's this complete creation story, and it is symbolic, right? Some people don't understand that. Some people think, no, it's true, therefore it's historically true, right? They don't understand that it could be true in other ways, like it could be true about giving us the meaning of life, right? It could use symbols to do this, which it does. So some people don't understand that it's symbolic, and they think that the Bible is claiming that the earth was created in 7 24-hour days, right? Now, we don't believe this, okay? We don't think that the earth was created in 7 24-hour days. But some people do. So what would happen, right? Well, if you look at the scientific evidence, it shows that it took about 4.5 billion years for the earth to form. And this is good, legitimate scientific evidence. Okay? This is using reason and looking at the evidence of the world and the universe that God, I believe, right, that we believe God created this, right? And if we look at what he created, we should be able to figure out how it works using our powers of reason, right? He wasn't trying to trick us or something. God didn't create a universe and then write a book that would that would contradict the way that he created the universe to try to see who really believed in the book. That doesn't make any sense. Plus, that's a pretty mean God. So again, we trust science, right? Good science, we can trust it. And this is good science, right? The formation of the universe of the Earth was about 4.5 billion years. Not 7 24-hour days. So it looks, if you're interpreting Genesis 1 as a science text, then it looks like there's a contradiction there. But guess what, right? So if you thought the Bible was saying that the earth was actually created in 7 24-hour days, and then you did good science and says, wait a minute, that's not how it worked, then you would think the Bible was wrong, right? And you might say, wait a minute, if it's wrong about that, it's probably wrong about everything. What is this God thing? Now, what are these religious people who, what are they talking about? Then you might say, oh, there's not even any God. There's a whole house of cards, right? Now, this is not correct for two reasons. Number one, there is no contradiction between the creation story in Genesis 1 and science, because the creation story in the Bible are symbolic. They're not intended to be taken as scientific or historical facts. People who do that are mistaken, and we'll talk about why people might do that, even in the face of scientific facts, why people might still try to hold on to a literalist interpretation of the Bible. But that's not the way the Bible is intended, and it's certainly not the nature of all the writings in the Bible, including Genesis 1. Secondly, even if popular belief about the transcendent or God was discovered to be incorrect, that doesn't mean that the transcendent or God doesn't exist. You know, I have a friend who believes in the transcendent, but doesn't believe in the Bible. They said that someone once approached them and was like, I can show you that God exists. It's right here in the Bible. Read these passages. See, there's proof, right? It was proof of something. I don't remember what they were proving, that God exists, or that you had to be a Christian to be saved, or there was some kind of proof they were trying to give her. And she said to them, listen, I don't believe in the Bible, so reading something in the Bible doesn't prove anything to me. And this person said, yeah, but it's right here in the Bible. Like, they just kept going back to it. And she had to tell them a few times before they understood that doesn't mean anything to her, because she didn't believe in the Bible. Now, again, maybe someone doesn't believe in the Bible. Does that mean that the transcendent doesn't exist? Right? The Bhagavad Gita talks about the transcendent. It talks about God. I might not believe in the Bhagavad Gita. That's a Hindu religious text. Does that mean that I don't believe in God? No. So that's kind of a saying if one part of a tradition or one part of faith is wrong, the whole thing's wrong. Well, that's not true. Just because certain ideas or popular belief about God isn't true, it doesn't mean that there's no transcendent at all. Right? And again, as I already said, in this case, it's not even a correct assumption. Right? Genesis 1 wasn't supposed to be a scientific description of the origins of the universe. So there's no real contradiction there. When you think about science itself has to constantly change and update its theories and ideas about the universe as it discovers new things about it. I mean, as we develop new theories and new ideas, ways of understanding natural phenomenon, it doesn't mean the natural phenomenon doesn't exist just because someone has a new theory about it, right? I mean, people didn't say matter doesn't exist when people started developing alternate views. So you had an atomistic theory about matter, and then people said develop string theory and quantum physics, these different ways to understand the physical universe. It didn't mean that the physical universe didn't exist just because it wasn't atomistic, right? So neither of these steps in this argument are very rational. What's actually going on is science is prudently and rightfully helping reveal a mistake that some people have about the transcendent or God. And in this case, it's pointing out that this fundamentalist interpretation of Scripture isn't correct. Okay, the Earth wasn't actually created in 7 24-hour days. And by the way, that's not what that story means. That's not what that story is trying to say. Anyway, so there's a mistaken belief among some people in a particular religious community, in this case, some Christians. Right? Again, not the Catholic tradition. We don't believe that. Not anymore, anyways. And then other people are taking this as a way to condemn all religion, saying, oh, see, they were wrong about, the Bible was wrong about the world being created in 7 days. So everything that the Christian religion teaches must be wrong. So that's just silly. You know, obviously people have if they're using this as evidence to condemn Christianity or a belief in God, then there must be other reasons, right? Yeah, there are other reasons. So number two, let's get to some other reasons. What we see, and we talked about this in the previous videos, was that people are going to try to use science to fulfill a psychological need for certainty, right? And, you know, good scientists will tell you, like, we don't know things for certain. But for some reason, people have a strong need to know things for certain, to have something they can rely on absolutely all the time. There's something they can really know for sure. It's just a common human desire. So one way that people deal with this is to believe that only that which can be proven to exist through common observation, using repeated demonstration, right? Through the scientific method, that is real, right? So in other words, if I can't prove it using methods that are based on direct observation, then it doesn't exist. So in other words, if it's imperceptible, then it doesn't exist. This invisible connection, this things that is in and beyond things, it doesn't exist. It's just what's here, what we can see and measure, right? What we can perceive. Now, what does this do? This gives them the sense that they can know things for certain. Because if that's all that exists, that's all there is, and everything else is imaginary, then everything can be known through the scientific method, right? And that makes us feel like, wow, we can know everything. Like basically, we're kind of omniscient. We're like all-knowing. That would really make me feel good and powerful and safe. And that's what we have today. People put a lot of faith in science, and we should put faith in science, but we should also not be irrational and extreme about it and think that we're masters of the universe because we have the scientific method. Again, it's not a good reason to discredit the possibility of the transcendent or say there's nothing else that exists except for what we can directly perceive, because it's just not rational to think that something doesn't exist just because you can't see it or just because you can't prove it, right? Some people are colorblind. Does that mean that those color frequencies don't exist? That's just not rational to say because we can't perceive it, it doesn't exist. Furthermore, if we want to actually like say what science can do and can't do, science can't prove anything for certain itself. Science itself is dependent on faith. And I'll explain that in the next video.